A lot of people hate the new Drake album, but that's not going to stop me from remixing it.
You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how
I'm not the biggest fan of the Drake songs where it sounds like he's just aimlessly singing over the beat. And that's how most of this album sounds, unfortunately. But I do actually really like the vocals from the track Sticky. And I was able to find a pretty good acapella of it.
Homer hanging on my neck. The bracelet matches a set.
So today I'm going to remix it into a house track starting from nothing, and that should also give you some deeper insight into how I make music. The first thing I'm going to do is move the beats per minute from 137 down to like 126 BPMs. That's more standard BPM for a house track.
Homer hanging on my neck. The bracelet matches a set.
Now we want to start with the most important things, and I think it's important to nail down the bass line and a memorable synth lead sound first. I'm just going to write a ton of different bass line ideas and then pick my favorite one. So I ended up writing like 10 different bass lines to try out. Making music isn't as artsy or abstract as people might think. It's about throwing a bunch of things at the wall and seeing what sticks. So this was my favorite one. I really like the rhythm and the groove of it.
Homer hanging on my neck. The bracelet matches a set. My brother name is Ting the Dollar. Stop all that back and forth.
So I've just been using a generic bass sound to write these bass line ideas. But now that I've picked a bass line, we can go in and try out a bunch of different sounds and pick whatever one I like best.
Homer hanging on my neck. The bracelet matches a set. My brother name is Ting the Dollar. Stop all that back and forth.
So I want this bass to sound really deep, and I think I've found a good sound for my tech house pack for Vital.
Homer hanging on my neck. The bracelet matches.
I just want to add some more punch to it.
Homer hanging on my neck. The bracelet match.
I also want to add a little pitch bend to some parts in the bass line just to give it a little extra movement.
Homer hanging on my neck. The bracelet matches a set.
Now we can start to build the rest of the track around that. But before we do anything else, let's lay out the arrangement. I want to do a pretty typical modern house arrangement. So I'm just going to kind of plan out in my head and mark where I want each section to go. So the first 8 bars is going to be like the first verse / intro. So I guess in a house track it would kind of just be the intro. And then after that, I'm gonna have the build up into the drop.
CEO, so the lifestyle she respect. Hey, 2 sprinters to Quebec.
So right there, I'm gonna start having all the build up drums come in and really build up the energy. So I have this idea in my head for a cool synth part to do before the drop hits. So I've left 4 bars of space in between the build up and the drop. So I've at least figured out where I want the first verse, first build up, and first drop to go. I'll just figure out the second verse and second drop and whatever I want to do in the second half of the song later. Now, every track needs one really memorable thing. It could be a lead sound, a catchy vocal, a bass line. It could be anything. I've got this idea in my head to take the bass line, but switch up the octaves and make it into a lead synth sound.
D-block, cause you know how sticky it get. You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky.
So I've got the basic idea down, but I still need to find the right sound for it. So I'm just gonna test out lots of different sounds and see what sounds good. Alright, so I've searched through different sounds in Vital and in Serum and in Nexus, and I actually found a Nexus sound that I think sounds pretty cool. I could end up changing it later, but let's go with that for now. Now we can focus on the drums, and I love programming drums. It's one of my favorite things to do. So let's just have fun trying out a ton of different drum sounds and making this house beat. Lately, I've pretty much only been using my house drums pack, so I'm just gonna use sounds from that. I'm gonna get the kick, clap, and open hat dialed in first. What I like to do is drag in all of the kick samples or open hat samples from a pack, and then drag them into a sampler so I can easily test out the different kick sounds. While I'm at it, I might as well drag in all of the claps and all of the open hat sounds too. Then I'll just write in the basic MIDI information for each of those, and I'll try out all the different samples and see what sounds cool.
Get, hey, you know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. She want me to play with that cat, hey.
And when I find a sample I like, I'll just mute that MIDI and then copy the MIDI up to the next note so I can keep auditioning more sounds. So I've narrowed it down to one kick sound that I like. Now let's do the same thing for the claps and the open hats. So here's what I came up with for those main drums.
You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it.
So let's mute the vocal and finish this drum beat. So I'm gonna go into the same pack and go to the thick layer loops. I'm just gonna mix this in subtly with those drums, and it's really gonna bring out the transients of the open hat and the clap. Just thickens up the drum beat a little bit. Now I'm gonna add some percussion, so let's go to the percussion hits folder. And I'm just gonna drag all of these into a sampler so I can mess around with different percussion hits to add some groove. So these are the percussion hits I ended up deciding on. Now let's add some shakers. So I've added like 5 different shaker loops in here. I'm just gonna test them all out and keep my favorite ones. All right, this one definitely works the best here. But I think I might add another shaker in the left ear to make the beat sound a little wider. I'm just gonna mix it in really subtly. Let's see if we can add some more percussion, like a bongo loop or like a tambourine or just something to fill it out a little more. So I'm just gonna go with that bongo loop. I think it sounds really cool. Let's add a tambourine loop on top of that and just see how that sounds. I think this tambourine is the winner. It just helps make the drum beat a little wider if I subtly mix it in and pan it way to the left. I feel like we can add like a little open hat or something every few bars. So here's how that drum beat is sounding now.
You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. She want me to play with that cat, hey. She love how I make it all wet.
That's sounding pretty cool to me. So now I think we should work on the build-up, and then I'll add some extra synth sounds and some atmosphere and things just to fill out the track. I figured now would be a good time to just clean up the project and rename and color code everything I have so far, just to keep it organized. By the way, all those drum samples I used are from my house drums pack that's on bigzsounds.com, where you can check it out in the description too. But now let's arrange these drums a little bit. So let's drag these over here and just loop them for now. We definitely don't want the low end in the kick in the beginning of the track. So I'm just gonna add this single band EQ, put it on low cut, and move it to like 130.
Home hanging on my neck.
So for the build-up, we need to send all the drums, except maybe the kick, to the drum bus so we can automate some reverb on them. I don't know if automating reverb on the kick sounds that good. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Let's just start with all the other drums for now.
Back, hey, 2 sprinters to Quebec. Cherie, où est mon bec? They only giving niggas +1, so I never pull up to the Met. You know I gotta bring a set. You know I gotta bring.
So I'm just gonna draw on that automation here so that reverb just builds up throughout the build-up.
B-block, cause you know how sticky it get.
And we probably want some automation to reduce the gain of the drums in the build-up as well. Now I definitely want to add a build-up snare, so I'm just gonna open a new instrument track and go to the Logic sampler. And I've actually already saved a bunch of different build snares. I just hit build snares, and then you can see all these snares are at my disposal. So I think it's time for another time lapse. I'm just gonna go through and find a good build snare to use. So I found a couple snare samples I like for the build-up, but sometimes it helps to add another snare below that and just use the root pitch to make sure it's in the same key as the song is. I know it's confusing, I'll show you what I mean. So I save a bunch of channel strips, which is basically just saving sounds with third-party effects on them. And one of them is called Pitched Snare Low. It's a snare from Nexus that has a really clear root note to it. So what I like to do is add these effects and only have the sound play below like 400 hertz. So it's just a root note playing. So I'm gonna find the key of the song, which is D sharp minor. I'm just gonna play that note and have it layered underneath our top build snare. So when I take this other snare layer, I'll add an EQ to it and just filter out the low end. And I can use this transient designer to open it up throughout the build-up. What I can also do is layer some white noise on top of those snares. So I can actually use a volume shaping plugin and have the white noise sweep follow along with the same rhythm as the snare. And we can automate down the mix like that throughout the buildup so it starts a little more choppy and becomes smooth.
You know I gotta bring the set. You know I gotta bring the G block. You know I gotta bring the D block. Cause you know I speak.
Let's see if we can add some automation to the bass too to open it up throughout the buildup. And I want to try one last thing, which is to introduce this lead melody somehow with like a pitched uplifter or something like that. So I'm going to copy over this lead and I'm going to make sure the bend range is pretty huge within Nexus. So just go to modulation and put the bend range all the way, 48 semitones. Now what we can do is make like an uplifter effect. So I'm just going to make one note in the key of the song and I'll go into the pitch bending and it's just going to rise up in pitch. That could sound cool. Maybe if we add like a filter to it. Let's get this single band EQ and automate this high cut. Alright, I think I got the volume automation down to make it a little smoother.
CEO, so the lifestyle she respect. Hey, 2 sprinters to Quebec. Cherie, où est mon bec? They only giving niggas +1, so I never pull up to the Met. You know I gotta bring the set. You know I gotta bring the G block. You know I gotta bring the D block. Cause you know how sticky it get.
Alright, right now it's obviously not mixed, so that lead sound is too loud going into the drop. So the drop doesn't have enough impact. So let's see what kind of impact we can add, like a big clap or a crash or white noise or something to make the drop hit a little harder. This actually might sound cool. So I have a couple short crash hits and then a bigger crash with some white noise layered on top of it.
You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get.
And then later on in the drop, I'll add a big stab sound. That stab sounds really cool. So what that is this big clap sound, or it's like an impact sound. And it's layered with the sound from one of my sample packs, the Synth hit. And I think that's in my Tech House pack for Vital. Yeah, it is. So that layered with the impact sounds super cool.
You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. She want me to play with.
I think I've got most of the main parts of the remix down now. I'm just gonna give my ears a break and come back later and add some extra sounds, fill it out with some atmosphere, maybe mix it a little better, and then I'll show you guys the end result. Alright, it's the next day now, and I felt like I was losing a little energy towards the end of that last session, so now I just came back to the track and I ended up changing a few things. I didn't like that one synth sound, so I ended up changing it to this one. Then I basically just arranged the track out into the different verses and build-ups and drops. And I added some extra ear candy, like these breaths. And these extra synth sounds. And then I just spent a little bit of time mixing it all together. So here's the end result. Also, if you want the full version, I'll just put that down below. But thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you next time. Peace.
She respect, hey, 2 sprinters to Quebec. Cherie, où est mon bec? They only giving niggas +1, so I never pull up to the Met. You know I gotta bring the set. You know I gotta bring the G block. You know I gotta bring the D block. Cause you know how sticky it get. You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. She want me to play with that cat, hey. She love how I make it all wet, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. You know how sticky it get, hey. She want me to play with that cat, hey. Hey yo, Eric, bring them girls to the stage, cause somebody's getting paid.